Okay guys, so the first step would be to prepare the time fuse, and for this I'm using white Chinese Visco or Chinese time fuse. It doesn't really matter what you use. I've used Visco in the past and it's worked, but just for the sake of this shell, I'm just gonna use this Chinese time fuse right here. But make sure that you mark it for 3-second burn time, because that's the time you'll need for a 3-inch shell. But the first step we're gonna do is we're going to glue it in place, and what you want to make sure is that the fire transfers in the middle of the shell. So you're going to want to cut it even so that the fire gets the middle of the shell, so it'll burst, and it'll help a lot with symmetry. So I'm going to glue this in place right now. Okay, so now that you have your time fuse glued in place, I just have to say that, oh yeah, I forgot to say that on the inside I prime my fuse with black match, because this time fuse is kind of unreliable. But and I'll also cross match it up here, but I'm gonna save that till after I'm done pasting the shell, before I put the lift charge on. But now the next step is as you can see, I use some glue on the inside, and I don't go skimpy on the glue on the outside. It's always better to use more, so to avoid a flower pot, because you don't want your shell to explode from the lift gases getting in the shell. But the next step would be to add your stars, and for this one I'm going to be using pink, or it's actually fuchsia, but they look pink, so I'll just say pink. And well, I'll put that composition in the description. But okay, so I usually start with a non-time fuse side first, but you just load your shell, and you have to make sure that I know a lot of people probably just like load the shell, and they do it sloppily, or not really sloppily, but I kind of like take my time, and I make sure that I could shove as many stars in as possible. But you could, can you see? Okay, well, you see how there's a tiny gap right here. A lot of people might like not worry about it or look at that, but what I try to do is I try and get all the gaps out, as like so I literally have no gaps left, so I get as many stars in as possible. And what that does is well, when the shell breaks, think about it, it's bursting about like 300-foot diameter, so this little tiny gap is going to be very noticeable when the shell breaks. So I just squeeze and fit as many stars in as possible, and it takes me a good 10 minutes to do so for both Hemis. So I'll get back to you when I do that. So I have both Hemis filled, and they're filled perfectly. I don't want to move them around too much, but I fill them up around to the edges. I never really like to fill stars like above the edges. Maybe I'll have 1 or 2 like that'll be above the edge, but this next step is optional. And I say optional just because the tissue paper, it's because I've used it, and I've not used it, and I've gotten great breaks with it and without it, so it's not like it really matters much. But I am going to use it because this shell isn't going to be fired for a couple of weeks, so just with, like, I don't know, moving around, the stuff could shift out of place, so I'm going to be using it. But add a couple scoops of burst of black powder rice hulls, and then put it right in the middle of the shell. Kind of open it up carefully. You don't want the stars to fall. I hate, well, a lot of times on the other Hemi the stars will fall a lot, but so kind of open it up a little bit and kind of keep filling it. Okay, so basically just fill it even with the top of the shell. I kind of do this to pack it down because I kind of compress it a little bit so I could just get as much as possible. And do this to the other side. Now that you have both hemispheres filled with the black powder coated rice hulls, I cut the excess tissue, or toilet paper in my case. So I cut the excess toilet paper off, and this burst isn't going to be sufficient enough. It's not powerful enough to break it for a nice hard break, so we're going to have to use a booster. So you're going to want to weigh out 1.1 grams, put it in this end, 1.1 grams, and put in this other end, so a total of 2.2 grams of whistle. So that'll help out burst the shell open so you get a nice round symmetrical break. I have everything evenly coated. I added the total of 2.2 grams of whistle for the booster. Gonna just take another piece of toilet paper or tissue paper, cover this end, and get the tape ready. Make sure it's tight on the shell because you don't want stuff to move. Now I'll just close the shell together like you would a normal shell. And then apply pressure, and then put on the tape to close the shell. And there's the closed shell. The first step in pasting is to take off the tape and apply gum tape around the shell, and put a piece of tape on the time fuse, and create 4 quadrants. So wrap one that's directly 90 degrees around the shell, and then another 90 degrees away from the pieces of tape around the shell, so you get 4 quadrants. And then just fill these quadrants in with smaller pieces of tape for the first layer. So the first layer has been pasted. This you can see the strips running along this way. And to prevent buildup, what we're gonna do for the second layer, we're gonna run another piece along the equator of the shell, and then I just do this, and then I smooth it out with just a film can. Make sure I smooth out every layer I do, just so the gum tape adheres to the shell better. And now we're gonna paste the second layer in a different direction. So what we're gonna do is I run the strip 90 degrees like before, like the first layer, but you don't add the second strip going around this way. So what I'm gonna do is fill in these 4 quadrants that run along the shell right here. So I'll paste the second layer so that it'll build up at these 2 points. So the second layer is finished, and the strips run along the shell this way. And now for the third layer, all you're going to do is one strip 90 degrees, another 90 degrees, and paste it exactly the same way as you did the first layer that we pasted. So now that you pasted the third layer once again is pasted exactly the same as the first layer. so the strips are running along this way. And so now for the fourth layer, apply a strip around the equator once again, and then remember last time we applied the strip going this way. We're going to apply the strip 90 degrees going this way, so that we create 4 quadrants, and the strips are going to be running along the shell like this, because on the second layer the strips ran along the shell this way, and it creates a small buildup right here, and what we're going to do is create a small buildup right here, so we have even pasting. That's the fourth layer. And then for the fifth layer and final layer, you just apply paste exactly the same way. One quadrant, one paste, another paste here, create 4 quadrants, and just paste it exactly the same way as you did the first layer and the third layer. Okay, so the shell is finished being pasted, and as you can see there's relatively low buildup anywhere at one point in the shell, so it's pretty round. But just let the shell dry for at least a day, and then we continue on adding the lift to the shell. Once your shell is dry, prime your time fuse any way you like. I cross-matched mine. You just split the time fuse down the middle with a razor blade and stick 2 pieces of black match in there, and then close it up with a clove hitch knot. Okay, so the shell weighed 130 grams, and I'm going to use 10% black powder to lift it. So I put 13 grams of black powder attached to my leader, and then you're just going to tape this onto the bottom of the shell. Now the last step, you could hot glue a star on top so you could have a rising effect.
Ooh.